is the church here is somewhat regenerated, and we got young families here, we got babies here. It's exciting to me that we're in the situation we're at compared to a lot of churches who were in similar situations. But we got a lot of great things going on here. But anyway, your group right here is just a super important group to us. Anything we can do to help you along the journey, and we appreciate Mike and Karen working with this group. But anyway, we're going to be talking today about the topic that was assigned me, which was Bible study. I know you've been talking about this verse here with the elders talking about different topics, and I'll have to say I really kind of chuckled a little bit when I saw my topic, because I thought of all the elders they could have got to talk about Bible study that are serious scholars. They got me, an old PE teacher, football coach, to be something scholarly. So I don't claim to be some kind of great scholar, but I do study. I do try my best to learn, and we're going to just go through some things today that this is really more of a discussion kind of. I've just got a bunch of slides I'm going to roll through and try to make some points, hopefully just reinforce probably what you already know, the importance of study, Bible study, go over some of the different verses and things like that. I spoke at chapel at Faulkner Tuesday, and so I worked on that little talk a good bit. I don't think anybody was in there. So I thought I'd just run through these slides because I was trying to make a point to the students at Faulkner Tuesday. That's a whole different crowd than you are. You guys are like in the top, 95th percentile of Bible knowledge. Faulkner is a whole different world. I mean, we got our small kind of group of people like Cole and Will, all y'all, so many of y'all went to Faulkner, that y'all were the cream of the crop, all right? But then we got some people who were not brought up in the church. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But my point the whole time was going to be, man, I got all these people in this, I don't know how many people there. Daniel ought to know he has to get things set up there, 400 people or something for chapel, 300, how many,
Like 12 groups. There's at least probably 300 or 400 on the floor.
Yeah.
And that's just to prevent the ones up the top
Yeah.
going up top so they can try to all focus.
Yeah, you old pros that have graduated and moved on, they've taken everybody out of the top section of bleachers up there and set up enough chairs where they can set everybody either on the floor in chairs or in the bleacher section that pulls out. Nobody up top anymore. So it's kind of different, but it's really hard for these guys to set things up. But anyway, I knew I had this crowd of a lot of people don't know anything about Christianity. They're learning some in Bible classes, but so I thought, well, I'm just going to try to teach them the importance of a foundation. So and I told them I like visual aids, and I was going to use the Tyne Davis Gymnasium as my visual aid. Since we were standing in there, I thought it'd be a good thing to use as visual aid. This picture was taken back about 1968. These are the first few slides or something I used at the Tuesday, and I just thought I'd throw these up here. But some things you can see now. The whole thing has been kind of encased to take in the multiplex as well. These windows are now covered up. When it first built, that aluminum foil that was there when y'all were there was not even there, but they couldn't see in the gym because the sun was going through. Somebody didn't think about that when they built the gym. But anyway, I showed them this picture of 1968 because the campus at Faulkner, they moved. Faulkner was established in 1942. It moved to the new campus in 1965 when they had hardly anything. So now 1968, this is pretty much what they had. It might have been 1967 because they say the gym here was finished in 1968, and it took quite a while to build it. But this was what it looked like when the building that I was using, the visual aid, was built. But I can remember as about a 10-year-old going about this time to Faulkner, and with my dad we drove the 10 miles or whatever across town to get out to Faulkner before the interstate was built. And standing in the middle of that gym before the floor was put in there. It was just dirt floor, just a hard dirt floor. And we were kind of like thinking, man, this is crazy. This is going to have this huge building to play basketball games in. And up until then, they've been playing their basketball games in junior high gymnasiums. One of them I can remember as a child going to watch basketball games that the school was playing in. I ended up spending 21 years teaching and coaching in that same building. So I've got a lot of memories about that building at Goodman Junior High School. But you folks that were Faulkner folks here, the only buildings were here were the boys' dorm, girls' dorm, about half the cafeteria, Johnson Hall. I remember that building because that's where, see, the high school used to be on this building, in this campus too, when I was in high school. This was Alabama Christian Academy too, or high school. The high school campus was not even built. So this was the high school building. The principal's office was right there, and that's where he paddled me one time, 3 times, I've never forgotten. And then that was also used by the high school. That's Greer Hall, I believe. The library was there, and they were building the gym. So it's come a long, long way. You think about all these, the buildings that now, football fields, baseball fields that ring that right there. But that's what it looked like back in those days. And this gym was even way back in those days, was kind of a hotbed for local high school basketball, college basketball. I can remember as a child going to games. I was probably at this game, I don't know where, but probably sitting up there with either friends or my parents or something like that, watching basketball games. They played a lot of other high schools, bar the gym, colleges, Tuskegee and Alabama State played there because it was the best gym in town. Alabama State's gym was small and old. So AUM's campus wasn't even built yet. There was no multiplex gym downtown. So this was where if you wanted to have a big basketball game, you came to what is now Faulkner. Well, that's 3 years after that building was built, I started going to school at Alabama Christian. That's me right there. And what I can't understand, it's in front of the rotunda, is that my parents let me out of the house with those pants on right there. Yeah, I just don't understand that, what my parents would let me do that. But anyway, the building was I told them about how it was a multi-purpose building. They had, I think that is the entire school, from kindergarten through maybe college, or maybe they had a school religion there that was 3rd and 4th year college for just Bible students. But you could fit everybody in the entire school in that area. But we also had concerts in that building. I don't know if y'all have heard of any of them. I remember like hearing Ray Stevens. Any of y'all heard of Ray Stevens? A bunch of folks came over the years. But anyway, the building has been used for a lot of different things. The gym colors were different colors. There's a high school basketball picture. This was a high school football pep rally. Y'all probably remember. Y'all have an idea who that is, Mike? It's Donnie Hilliard. When he was about 25 years old, and he was my baseball coach and a marriage and family teacher. He ended up, anybody else have Donnie Hilliard? Was that before y'all's day? Karen had him. He was the guy that taught marriage and family. He's the guy that really built the marriage and family classes that Steve Wages, who I'm guessing some of y'all might have had. But Donnie Hilliard unfortunately had a early death due to a terrible disease. But anyway, I just kind of threw that up there for those folks that might have remembered Donnie back in the day. This one I put here because the picture was taken in the gym, but that's me on the top right over there playing baseball out there. And I thought anybody recognize that guy right there? Goes to church here. It's Hal Wynn. He's now the athletic director at Faulkner. Yeah, well, yeah. Both of us had hair and were skinny back in those days. And for what it's worth, there's the preacher at Redland Road now, David Phillips. Oh. I got a brother named David Phillips, but that's the other David Phillips. My brother David Phillips married that David Phillips' sister. So Denise Phillips married David Phillips. She's still Denise Phillips. So anyway, some of you guys y'all recognize that, Mike? Joey Wigington, right there. When he was man about campus there, and the 3 of us went to school together, and I was just making the point that we really appreciate the idea of getting to come back and teach at the school we love so dearly. And then the final thing I was really trying to say to them, this is the more recent picture about at Faulkner, that the gym is all these years, 54 years later, it's still a really, really good gymnasium. It looks better now, I think, than it did when it was first built. It looks a lot different. First built, these seats up top were brown chairs. The bleachers down below were wooden. There used to be another whole section of bleachers on that side of the gym over there. But anyway.
No ceiling and no air conditioning.
Yeah, yes, I mentioned that in the talk, how before this beautiful tile ceiling, it was just like a spray-on ceiling up at the top, and it kept flaking down where you'd have to dust mop it 2 or 3 times a day if you wanted to play sports on it. So that was kind of frustrating. I remember the first basketball game I ever played, there were no bleachers. They were trying to get a game in before the season was over with, and then they just weren't finished. But they were able to play the game, And I can remember sitting up in that section right there, but there were no bleachers. You just had to sit on the concrete up there during the game. So it was kind of neat. But once again, the final point was, to them, was you need to build your life on solid rock. And I told them about dirt floor, and I can still feel that dirt, hard dirt. It was, just hard dirt. And then they poured concrete on it. And so I know that building had a solid foundation, and 54 years later, all the wear and tear, people in and out of there, the Alabama heat, tornadoes, all kind of stuff that the buildings have to withstand, and it's still standing really good. So I was just trying to make the point of building your life to these people who've never really thought much about church on solid rock. And I read the words to him of wise men built his house upon the rock. And then we sang, my hope is built on nothing less, solid rock. Then we sang, Jesus, you're my firm foundation. And that was what I was trying to do with the students there. So I thought, well, it's kind of the same thing here when we talk about foundations, which is kind of slanting it a little bit differently. Today, the talk is about Bible study. And the thought is, at this stage in your life, you're still building your foundation. Even though you're mature, in some ways you always build your foundation, in some ways. But this is a hugely important time in my life, where you're at now, because a lot of things were being thrown at me that I had to try to digest. I wanted my faith to be my own, not my parents'. I'll talk about my dad in a minute, but he had a huge influence on me. But I wanted my faith to be my own. And the point is, now your foundation from here on out needs to be on the Bible, all right? Because all the discussions you have really need to come right back here. Okay, this is a verse let's see, I've tempted to try to recite it, but I know I'll mess up. It's blessed not is the man that walketh the counsel of the godly, standeth with sinners, sitteth at the seat of the scornful, for his delight in the law of the Lord, for this law to see meditate both day and night. He should be like a tree planted by the rivers of waters. His fruit shall prosper, his leaf shall not wither. What's the next part? And whatsoever you do shall prosper. The ungodly sober like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, or sinners the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. When I was about 10 years old, I knew that. I could recite that. Old age kind of has a way of affecting your memory, so I wouldn't really want to full scale try it today. But that's a verse that means a lot to me about study, because that was the only reason I learned when I was 10 years old. My father was the preacher at the church. It's called the Cloverdale Church of Christ. Actually, the building to the south side of the Church of Christ is on the corner of Hull and Edgemont. That's where Cloverdale Church of Christ was. So anyway, I'll try to make a long story short. My dad was the preacher at Cloverdale Church of Christ. In the late 1960s, or about 1970, the question was asked, what happens if a black person comes to church? And the elders had 5 elders. 2 elders said, well, we'll welcome everybody. Church is for everybody. We actually had 2 elders that said, well, if that happens, we'll kindly ask them to go to the church down the street, or across town somewhere. And then so they had a vote. One elder was still an elder, but he was invalid, basically. They went and picked him up out of the house, brought him back to the church, raised his hand, and by a 3-2 vote, they decided that they would not allow anyone that wasn't white in the church building. Yeah, that's how far we've come since the 1960s. My dad resigned immediately, so we had to pack our bags, and we moved to the Lakewood Church of Christ, which has evolved into the Vaughn Park Church of Christ. But anyway, while we were at Cloverdale, before all that ever happened, my dad had a leadership class. Didn't have lads to leaders or anything like that, so he just did something on his own. And that was the verse he had us memorize. There were like 7 or 8 of us boys that were in that class on Sunday afternoons before Sunday night church. And so he had us doing things like that. I didn't really know why he had us remember that verse. I didn't think much about it. But now I think, as I'm older and think about Bible study, I look at a lot of that right there, and it just speaks volumes to me. I was going to kind of digest that a little bit more, but the time frame I think I'll go on. But just a lot of that. But I guess the thing I like so much is, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. This guy who doesn't do all that stuff, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and doth he meditate day and night. So our Bible study should be something that's just constant, not something we do. There's a lot of people, I'll be honest with you, that are showing up at churches Sunday morning. It's the last time they'll think about it till maybe next Sunday morning. But it should be something we're doing daily, basically. That's my dad right there. And like I said, he was a great gospel preacher, scholar. Unfortunately, I didn't inherit those genes. Some of the other family members did, but I didn't. But I guess the point I want to make here is I had mentors I could always go to if I had the question I got stuck on. I hope you got a mentor. If not, try to find somebody that you can go to. And he was my mentor for the first 30 years of my life. And I could go to him to any question I had about anything about the Bible. And then he passed away. And so I had this huge gaping hole in my life, and my father was gone. And I needed somebody to fill that gap. And that's, when my father-in-law was able to fill the gap. He was Pat's dad. He was not a full-time preacher, a part-time preacher. He worked different little country church up around Athens, Tennessee. I don't know if you know where that is, but that's where he preached like 6 or 7 different churches around that area. And from the age maybe 30 to, I don't know, say 40, I could go to him. We called him Papaw. I said, Papaw, I got a question about something, and he could answer it. He was kind of the, Rex Turner doesn't mean a lot to y'all probably, but years ago you could around here people go to Rex Turner for the answer. He was one of the founders of Faulkner. And then it was kind of the same situation. Then unfortunately he passed away. So there I was. I didn't have my dad, didn't have my father-in-law. I was trying to think, who could I ask if I had some questions? So when I became an elder, immediately there were some things that I'm like, wow, I need to think this thing through some more. So I've had another mentor since then. Haven't had to talk to him a whole lot recently, but especially early as elder, this is who I went to see, Cecil May. I would, I'd just corner him somewhere and say, Brother May, I've got a question I'd like to talk to you about, and he would answer it to the point to my satisfaction. And so I'll always be thankful for Cecil May and what he has done for me. The next few things are just going to be kind of review. These are Bible verses. You've probably dealt with the topic of studying and that type stuff. The first one there, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed. The big word there, study, I didn't realize this till I was kind of looking some more about this the other day, was that King James Version is about the only version that says study. The rest of the versions still, it means basically the same thing, but pretty much the other versions seem to say whatever you do, not just studying, but whatever you do, do it to show thyself approved unto God. And study could certainly fall into that category, but that's one that is King James. I think we found one more that interprets that word study. Here's another one that I used just the other night. I'll tell you about that in just a second. All Scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. The point I think about here mostly is all Scripture is God-breathed. Most people don't understand that about the Bible. A lot of people just think it's some book that's not necessarily God-breathed. And I found that out. This was Tuesday night. This kind of a neat thing at Faulkner this year. Billy Camp is teaching the freshman Bible. Again, Mike and Karen are involved in this too. But Billy Camp's teaching Bible. Andrew Gifford's teaching the Bible class. Andrew Kingsley's teaching the freshman Bible class. And they've started something called Bible Labs, which for 10% of their grade, the students go out to various Christian homes in the community to do some, they call it labs because they basically interview the people who are at their house. So it's kind of neat in a way, very neat, in that these are 5 guys at our house Tuesday night. This guy right here is Ernesto. He's from Cuba. He's been in the country 5 years now, lives in Woodmere. None of these guys had transportation, so I had to get them all there. Most of them I picked up at Faulkner. That is Fei Ping. Both of these guys are from China. They're kind of in the program that brought some students from China. When I met him, I said, "Do you like to be called Fei Ping?" I'm trying to speak in a Chinese accent, I guess. Anyway, he says, "You can call me Bob," from Birmingham. And we they bring questions that they basically ask us. They'll ask them tonight. You said tonight. They'll have a group come to their house tonight, and they ask questions that I don't know where Billy and them got the questions, but gives you a chance to talk about the Bible to them. And we started our group the other night, and I'm trying to figure out, where are they at religiously? What do they know about the Bible? And one of the questions had to do with what is God's love, something along that line. And I thought, well, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. So I asked them, I said, how many of y'all have heard John 3:16? And not a single one of them had ever heard of John 3:16. And that was just staggering to me that nobody had heard I told them that, there used to be a guy that would be at football games, he'd hold up a sign and all it said was John 3:16. And he'd go baseball games, look there in the backstop, there'd be a guy with a curly, multicolored afro, John 3:16. I just thought everybody knew that if you had any concept of the Bible. And they didn't. So this is kind of neat that we have access to these guys to teach them just the very basic things. So I was like scrambling and trying to say, we better go back to the beginning, and I talked about the inspiration of God in the Bible. I mean, I'm sure these guys from China probably never had any connection with a Bible study. So and they were great guys. We had a good time, a lot of fun. I talked to them about how, the Bible can guide you to what you need to do in life. And, your word is a lamp to my feet, light to my path. It was a great song. Y'all know that song, Thy word is a lamp to my feet? I love that song. I wish we'd learn it here. But just never have gotten around to it. Mike, you know that song? Thy word is a lamp to my feet.
I've heard it.
It's a good song, beautiful song. It is a little complicated more than others, but great song. All right, then can y'all tell who that is right there? Brad will know who that is. Yeah, that is Jeremy. And I guess we can tell a little bit about the visit. We went yesterday. Jeremy spoke at Brantwood's Children's Home. And this was, Brad and I were there. And it was a fun little day. We got to meet, how many kids? 8. This is a great opportunity to teach kids who they probably knew more than the Faulkner kids did, to be honest with you, because I think church groups have been kind of coming in over the years. They had some questions. One of them asked the question, what was it, are the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses the same, or something along that line. So they know some stuff, but I guess the point I'm making is we spend so much time around each other in church here, and y'all are on a high level of Bible study. These guys know nothing, basically. And it just, having speaking at chapel, knowing the audience there, the kids that came to our house, and then Brentwood yesterday just really made obvious there's just not much Bible knowledge out there in the world in general. So we need to be more prepared so we can be more prepared when we're talking to people like these people. If you have the opportunity to go, I think they seem to enjoy us coming, Brad. I mean, the lady that worked there was like, yeah, y'all coming back, aren't you? That kind of stuff. So hopefully we'll have some more opportunities. They ask for more volunteers or anything. Volunteer, it's a good trip. Oh my goodness, how did my grandson get in there? It was kind of one of those little God things. Every now and then something just happens, makes you stuff. And then I come to this show that I didn't really know anything about. Maybe y'all know about it. It's called Forged in Fire. Anybody ever heard of that show? And I thought, and they were sitting there talking about swords, the rest of that show. And these guys got down to the final 2 competitors, and they were tasked with building a sword that had to be 7 feet long. It's some sword that's going to be a replica of some sword that's in a museum somewhere that in Europe they used or something. But so these guys had to make these 7-foot swords, and they came to the final competition. And to determine the winner, anybody see this show?
Yeah,
You see? How about this particular one? With yes. So you can probably explain it better than I can, but they had like 2 pigs hanging down from the ceiling there, and they took this sword that got in and whacks all the way across through it.
He says it will cut.
And what was the word he said?
The guy says it will cut.
It will cut. I heard him saying something. I couldn't tell what he was saying, but yeah, it will cut, because the winner particularly, his sword went like just about all the way completely through a pig this big and a pig that big. And you talk about things like joints and marrow. It was cut through everything. I mean, it had to be incredibly sharp. Then they jabbed it. Then they put, what was it they put up? Oh, they put up two other objects anyway. I can't remember exactly what that was. But the guy sliced right through the whole thing. So it just made me think how sharp, a sword, those were two-edged swords, can be. And that's what they're saying the Bible is. It can cut to the heart as opposed to cut through a pig. Here's another verse that stands out a lot. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I think of churches sometimes these days that have gone way out or something because they just didn't know the Bible. They went by what's popular, what's trendy, and it may not even be anything to do with what's in the Bible. But it was more important to draw a crowd. I think of one church in particular. It was a struggling church. Only had the church building was they probably had 200 people, but a 1,000-seat auditorium, something like that. And they just basically said, we're too conservative. It's a business. I hate to say it, but church is a business. All the money that goes through our hands as a church here into the mission field and stuff is millions of dollars, and if you're not paying your bills, something's got to happen. So this church decided, well, we're just going to forget what we've been doing all these years and how that church was started, and they brought in a new guy that flipped it over to well, I guess we'd have to tag it more liberal church, much more liberal church. But they accomplished what they wanted to do. They got more people there, and they got where they could pay the light bills and. But on the other hand, I just feel like they could have accomplished so much more. All right, here's one. Therefore ye shall lay up these things, these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes, and ye shall teach them to your children. One of these days, if you're parents, that's kind of the way it should be if you're a parent. It should just be a part of your life. You're just constantly thinking about the Bible and studying the Bible. I didn't know what a frontlet was. Anybody know what a frontlet is? I'd never heard of it, but I kind of looked it up a little bit. It's evidently something the Jewish men would do years ago. So actually, some of them still do it in the Jewish religion. A frontlet, it's going to be a bad description, but I'll try to give you an idea. It's something you strap to your head, and it's a little like leather box that has 4 scriptures in it. And these, there's pictures, Google frontlet, and it tells you more about it. But they walk around with this little box on their head. If I got a box on my head, I'm going to be thinking about it, and they've got these scriptures in this box.
It's a conversation starter.
For sure, yeah. And like I say, they still, some of them wear these things. But, the point is that it should be something that you're just constantly thinking about all the time. Oh, how did you get back up there? All right. These were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were. So there's, once again, there's that search the scriptures daily. Does that tell us what the frequency of what things should be? I'm guilty as too. Is 4 or 5 days may go by sometime, and I hadn't spent much time at all thinking about the Bible. Thankfully, that's the great thing about Wednesday night. Kind of, if you do that Wednesday nights, you don't have those week-long stretches of not studying. But once again, that's exactly what you'd want to do, is study the Bible daily, if at all possible. All right, next little section I was going to just kind of run through with some what I call hot topics or current events. There's a lot of things going on now that are somewhat new that I didn't think about much when I was a young Christian or your age, something like that, but they've popped up here recently, and we need to be educated in how to defend things. One of them that's just popped up really hot is abortion. When the Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade, that really got everybody's attention. It's going to probably have a effect on the election somewhat. I hope not negatively. But are we ready to defend our position on abortion? because a lot of people never did talk about it much, but boy, do they talk about it now. So that's just one thing we need to think about. Whoop, boy, what's going on there, Mike?
You got click out?
Yeah, I did. Whoop, there we go. All right, the lottery is another topic. There's a lot of people who are divided on this. Brings in a lot of revenue. Should we overlook the fact that it's basically a tax on poor people? But it's going to solve a lot of problems. I'm not here to tell you what your position you should have. You probably already have a position. Can you defend it? I know how I feel on this, and I think I can defend it. But you could spend a whole class on each one of these topics. Boy, here's one. Gender roles. Man, that's something I never thought I would hear a Supreme Court nominee say she couldn't define a woman. Just unbelievable in my mind that we're here in our society like we are today. And all the other things that I was warned about this stuff when I was a child. My dad used to say stuff, if things don't change, things like homosexuality are going to be a big deal. I didn't even know what that meant until I was like 14 years old, what a homosexuality was, to be honest with you. I mean, it was just wasn't anything people talked about. But once again, we better be ready to defend our positions in these different areas. Since time's moving along, I'm going to kind of skip on through some of these. But evolution, still big topic. It was a big topic when I was a child. But I will say this, I feel much more convinced than ever that God created us. He created the world, just as opposed to we're just some random happening. It's kind of common sense almost these days with the science we have that we can tell various things. But got all kind of resources. Politics Press is great in this area as well. So those are some other areas. Suicide, is that self-murder or what is it? Study it. Something I'd never really thought much about. Some of these are things people will come to the eldership about and ask us about. Did my grandfather, when he committed suicide, is he condemned to hell? Those kind of questions you have to answer as an elder sometimes. Well, I'm going to have to move real fast. But these are just some common topics of church that the elders deal with a lot. Divorce and remarriage is constantly a question. We deal with that a lot. Instrumental music. A lot of people say, we used to get complaints like, we have too many sermons on instrumental music. Somebody went back and checked the sermons for the last 2 years. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. For the last 2 years, we'd never had a sermon on instrumental music. Yet, we were accused of having way too many sermons on instrumental music. Of course, now we've got a church that used to identify with the Church of Christ that has started instrumental music, and I think a lot of that was due to lack of knowledge. Tithing or giving, what should you give? Just one of those things we need to research. Baptism, is baptism essential? Women's leadership roles, as society is changing, trying to kind of blur the lines between the man and the woman. Those questions are going to come up more and more. Worship services, some of the topics like praise teams, that kind of stuff. Attire, all right, that's a kind of a contentious one with a lot of people. The people here that are 80 years and above, they don't understand. I got a coat and tie on today, mainly just to keep them happy. But there's those 80-year-olds and up, they really think you're supposed to wear a coat and tie and should wear a coat and tie to something like church. But back when they were children, if you looked at a Major League Baseball game, people in the stands all wore coat and ties. So it's just a different culture kind of thing like that. But, you need to be able to defend your position in case you ever need to. Okay, let's see here. All right, there's some really, I call it deep thoughts. You remember the Saturday Night Live thing they used to have? Whatever that, remember that? So many things with it. I don't really get bogged down in these areas, but a lot of people really love to get into some really nitty-gritty, deep will stuff. How about free will versus God's foreknowledge? I was down at Creekwood where my son goes to church, and my grandbaby's there now. And the guy in the Sunday school class, he wasn't a regular member there, and he just was kind of a smart aleck, and kind of asked the teacher, what about God's free will? How in the world, if we have free will, does God know ahead of time what's going to happen? And the teacher was really kind of caught off guard and didn't really respond to it very well. And after class, one of the members came over and talked to that young man and tried to explain the best he could to him in a short amount of time how you feel that happened. You ever thought about that? Can you defend it? Do you understand? I mean, how do you explain that? That's the kind of question an unbeliever will ask. Why do some children go bad? That's a question a lot of us old folks ask. You know, it's just sadly that just about every family I know has somebody who's maybe left the church or something, and you just don't understand it. This child was raised the same way, and this one's gone off into the world and doesn't have anything with religion, yet this child, you know, is a faithful Christian and that kind of stuff. Those are, train up a child the way he should go. Is that verse wrong? He won't depart from the Lord, you know, I think that, research it. I mean, I've studied that one a lot over the years, and I've had to change my opinion of what I thought that verse meant, probably when I was your age. I think differently now. Why do bad things happen to good people? You know, how do you explain that? How do we make these announcements at church, so-and-so's got cancer, you know, they're really struggling. They're just, how does a good God do that? You know, study will help you answer that question a whole lot better. And we've actually had a discussion on this in an elders meeting recently. Somebody was complaining about somebody having tattoos. I'd never really thought about it, you know, to tell you the truth. Whether it's wise or not, I don't know, but somebody, you know, there's a verse in the Old Testament that's taken out of context a lot of people will use. But you need to study it, you need to know about the verse and that kind of stuff to be able to defend your position. So I guess the conclusion is, I just thought I'd stick that picture in there because that's what it ought to look like when somebody's studying. You ought to study until you're exhausted and can't study anymore. Once again, I didn't have any questions to really answer today. I really wanted to just throw more questions at you to kind of motivate you to want to study and find the answers to some of these things that you'll probably be, especially if you're going to be a leader in the church someday, you will be asked these questions. I feel good about my faith and the answers I have to these questions, but you need to be the one answering these questions and not me or anybody else. And the Bible is your foundation on where you answer those questions. Appreciate y'all letting me come today, and we'll